When Stanford rejected me, I didn't just lose a college acceptance. I lost a version of myself my immigrant parents spent their whole lives building. Palo Alto, California, March 2019. I was in the bathroom of a Starbucks off University Avenue, Palo Alto, sitting on a closed-lid toilet with my phone clenched in my hand, like a lifeline I no longer wanted to hold. My chest was tight. My fingers were numb. The email was still open. We regret to inform you. 5 words. Just 5, but they hit like a brick through glass, loud, sudden, and irreparable. I read it again, and again. Each time it got colder, sharper, like a dull knife pressed deeper, until it finally breaks skin. Stanford was supposed to be it. The dream, the destination, the promise. I had imagined opening this email so many times, always while picturing my mom's face lighting up, tears welling in her eyes as she whispered, "We did it." I pictured hugging my dad as he nodded silently, that rare and quiet pride radiating off him like heat from furnace. I saw us at the Stanford bookstore buying overpriced sweatshirts and keychains that would become relics of our making it. But there on that toilet seat, with the air smelling of disinfectant and stale coffee, I realized something gutting. I hadn't just been rejected by Stanford. I had been rejected by the version of myself I was taught to become. I am the only child of Vietnamese immigrants. My parents came to the U.S. with nothing but stories about hunger, war, and the belief that this country would reward hard work with opportunity. No one ever said it explicitly, but the script was always the same. You study hard. You get into a good school. You get a good job. You make all this sacrifice, this silence, this struggle, worth it. And I followed it, religiously. I didn't date. I didn't party. I didn't go to prom. I didn't sleep in on weekends. While other kids were on TikTok or texting their crushes, I was studying for the SAT, leading a volunteer tutoring program at the local library, working on a mobile app to help Vietnamese-American kids like me stay connected to their language. I didn't do it just to get into Stanford. I did it because I thought that's what being worthy looked like. Because for kids like me, acceptance doesn't just mean a college spot. It means legitimacy. It means proving that your parents didn't throw away their lives so you could be average. So when Stanford said no, it didn't feel like they rejected me. It felt like I had betrayed them. I walked out of Starbucks like I had been hit by a truck. It had started to drizzle, a soft, persistent kind of rain that didn't seem heavy until you realized it had soaked you to the bone. People passed me on the street, umbrellas up, AirPods and latte cups in hand. They looked clean, efficient, successful. I felt small, dirty, like I didn't belong on this sidewalk anymore. My backpack was soaked through by the time I reached the parking lot. I sat in my dad's 2006 Toyota Camry, engine off, forehead pressed to the steering wheel. The windshield fogged up around me. I didn't turn on the heat. I just sat, frozen. The emails had all come in the same week. Columbia, Harvard, Princeton, Berkeley, even UC schools that my friends got into with lower GPAs than me. Rejection, rejection, waitlist, rejection, and now this, the final one, the one that I had pinned my everything on. It was over. That night, I didn't eat dinner. My mom knocked gently and left a serving of mac and cheese by the door. I didn't touch it. I stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine a future, any future, and it scared me how blank my mind felt. I had spent so long aiming for one destination that I didn't know how to function without it. It was like training for years to become an astronaut, only to be told at the launch pad that you were never meant to fly. I opened Instagram. Big mistake. One of my classmates had posted their acceptance letter to Yale. Caption, hard work pays off. I almost laughed. Hard work? I had bled for this. I had worn down my soul for this. What they don't say in the captions is what kind of hard work gets rewarded in America. Because for some of us, the rules are different. I shut my phone off, threw it on the bed, and pulled the covers over my head. I whispered, maybe I'm just not meant to be great. And in that moment, I believed it. Here's the thing no one tells you about rejection when you're 18. It doesn't just bruise your ego. It rearranges your identity. It doesn't feel like you didn't get into a school. It feels like the world just told you that you are not who you thought you were. I had spent my entire life trying to be the kind of kid that schools like Stanford wanted. The star student, the leader, the bridge between cultures, the overachieving, grateful child of immigrants who beat the odds. But here's the truth. The system doesn't care how hard you work if you're playing a game rigged against you. The next morning, my dad knocked on my door. Just once. He didn't come in, but he said something I'll never forget. You don't have to make us proud by being perfect. We're already proud. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just laid there in silence, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. Because I realized then I had never been doing this for me. I had spent so long trying to be someone else's idea of success that I had no idea who I actually was, what I liked, what I wanted, who I could be outside of grades and scores and checklists. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't rewrite the past. But it did something more important. It cracked the shell. It gave space for a question I had never asked before. If I'm not going to Stanford, then who do I get to be instead? And somewhere deep inside me, a seed of rebellion started to grow, not against my parents, not against college, but against the idea that I only had one shot, one path, one worth. When you spend 18 years building a version of yourself based on what everyone else expects, it only takes one rejection to watch it collapse like a sandcastle in high tide. That was me after Stanford. Not just rejected, but undone. The week after it happened, I stayed in my room with the blinds shut. I didn't shower. I lived on instant noodles and bottled water, binge watching shows not for entertainment, but for escape. The only thing I opened was Netflix. Not my inbox. Not my future. My parents didn't say much. I think they thought I just needed time to process. My mom left food by the door every evening, carefully arranged like offerings an altar, sticky rice, fried eggs, sometimes soup. I never touched it. I wasn't hungry. I was hollow. People called, teachers, mentors, a friend or two. I ignored them all because the only question they had was the one I had no answer to. So what now? One night, I stared at the bathroom mirror for so long, I forgot I was even looking at myself. I didn't recognize the person. My eyes were ringed with fatigue, my face slack, my body sunken. I felt like a house where someone had turned off the lights and walked out. I punched the wall, not hard enough to break anything, except the silence inside me. I screamed, loud, raw, ugly. That scream didn't fix anything, but it felt honest in a way nothing else had in weeks. The next morning, something in me shifted. Not hope, not clarity, just a kind of defiance. Like, if I was going to burn, I might as well set the fire myself. I got up, opened my laptop for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, and started searching, not for transfer options or second-tier colleges. I didn't want that anymore. I was done begging to be let in. I wanted to build something on my own terms. Remembered how I'd loved coding back in high school, how I'd spent hours teaching myself Python and Swift to build that app for Vietnamese-American kids. It hadn't gone viral, barely a few hundred downloads. But when I was doing it, I felt awake, capable, free. That feeling, that clarity, I wanted it back. So I applied to a coding bootcamp in Oakland. No GPA requirements, no essays, no test scores, just a skills assessment and a video interview. It cost $7,500. I didn't tell my parents right away. When I finally did, my mom said, "Why not community college? You can reapply to Stanford next year." My dad said, "You're giving up." Maybe I was, but maybe giving up on someone else's plan is how you begin yours. They didn't understand, and to be honest, I didn't expect them to. I just withdrew everything I had saved from tutoring gigs, part-time work, red envelopes from 10 years of TED holidays, and I paid in full. It felt reckless. It also felt right. The first day of boot camp, I showed up in worn-out sneakers, a borrowed backpack, and more doubt than direction. But something about the place felt real. The students around me weren't chasing Ivy League fantasies. They were chasing survival, reinvention, freedom. One guy used to be a chef. Another woman had 2 kids and used to work reception at a dentist's office. A guy named Sam slept in his car and coded all night at public libraries. None of them cared about resumes. They cared about the work. And the work was brutal. 10-hour days, 6 days a week. Projects due every 2 days. Constant feedback. Public code reviews that exposed every flaw, every blind spot. But it wasn't toxic. It was honest, pure. I struggled. But I also started to breathe again. There was no standardized test, no admissions committee, no filtered smile, just raw thinking and actual doing. Late one night, around 1 a.m., I was sitting in a cramped co-working space, debugging a front-end state management issue in a group project. My fingers ached. My brain pulsed. I hadn't eaten in hours. And I caught myself smiling. Not because I'd solved it yet, but because I was knee-deep in a problem that mattered, and no one was grading me for it. It hit me then. This is what learning was supposed to feel like. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Jason, a guy from my high school who got into Stanford. He wanted to check in, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of curiosity. He told me he was taking a semester off, said the pressure, the competition, the constant feeling of not being enough, even there, was eating him alive. When he asked what I was doing, I told him boot camp, rebuilding the language app, learning how to code properly, creating stuff. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "That actually sounds useful." I laughed, not out of smugness, out of disbelief, because for the first time, someone who got everything I thought I wanted was looking at my life like I had something he didn't. I wasn't falling behind. I was building my own road. By the end of the program, I contributed to 2 open source projects, built 3 working apps, and gotten called in for 3 job interviews. One of those interviews was with a startup in Oakland run by a Vietnamese-American woman named Lynn. She didn't ask about my education. She asked why I built that language app. I said, because I never had anything like it growing up, and I want to make sure the next kids did. She nodded and said, "Me too." She hired me on the spot. It was my first job, my first real paycheck, my first proof that I wasn't a failure, just someone who took a different exit off the same highway. My parents still didn't fully understand. But one night, I came home to find my dad showing the app to a friend on his old iPad, tapping proudly through the screens. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't have to. I went to my room, closed the door, and let the tears come. Not from shame this time, but from release. Because for once, I wasn't trying to be impressive. I went to my room, closed the door, and let the tears come. Not from shame this time, but from release. Because for once, I wasn't trying to be impressive. It was the start of the version of myself I'd never dared to imagine. A self not built on rankings or reputation or pressure to prove my worth. A self built on curiosity, creation, and courage. I had stopped waiting to be chosen. I had started choosing myself. And that, it turns out, is how you win. I used to think success had a sound. The rustle of acceptance letters sliding out of envelopes. The applause after a valedictorian speech. The low murmur of parents bragging to each other about where their kids got in my head, all played like a trailer for the life I was supposed to live. But sitting on the floor of my apartment 6 months after getting rejected from Stanford, laptop open, my latest app launch window blinking on the screen, I realized that success wasn't a sound. It was silence. Not emptiness, but peace. The kind of stillness that settles after a storm when you're no longer performing for anyone, including yourself. When you're just doing the thing you love, in your own name. I didn't arrive at that moment overnight. After getting hired at the startup, everything moved fast. I started working 12-hour days, diving into real-world problems, constantly stretching myself beyond what I thought I was capable of. I rebuilt the Vietnamese language app from scratch, adding speech recognition, cultural games, and parental dashboards. We tested it in classrooms. Some kids laughed when they heard their own voices repeating tones correctly. Others, shy at first, began choosing Vietnamese over English in small ways, greeting their grandparents properly, singing the lullabies their mothers hadn't sung in years. I started receiving emails from parents. They didn't say things like, "Great design," or "This will look good on your resume." They said, "Thank you for helping my daughter speak to her grandmother." They said, "This made my son proud to be Vietnamese." Those words hit me harder than any GPA ever had, because they weren't about validation. They were about connection, the kind of impact you can't fake, force, or measure with a college ranking. I remember one night in particular, 6 months in. I was walking home from work, the air crisp, the sky just turning that late winter blue. I passed by a group of students in Stanford hoodies, laughing loudly about some lecture. For a moment, I felt the ache return, the one that used to whisper, "That should have been you," but it faded. Not because I didn't still carry the scars, but because I was walking home from a job I had built myself into, not tested into. I was creating something no application committee had asked for, and it mattered. That was the moment I realized I didn't envy them anymore. I had crossed an invisible line, not in status, but in self-worth. That summer, I was invited to speak at a local youth tech conference. The organizer had seen our app online and reached out. I almost said no. Imposter syndrome doesn't vanish overnight. I thought, I'm not a founder. I didn't graduate from MIT. I'm just a bootcamp kid who flunked the system. But something in me said yes. Not because I believed I had all the answers, but because I was finally okay with sharing the parts of my story that weren't clean or impressive, the parts that mattered. Standing on that stage, I told the truth. I told them about the rejection, about crying in the Starbucks bathroom, about nearly giving up. I told them about choosing a path no one around me believed in, not even me at first. I looked out into the crowd and saw my old self in a dozen faces. Kids who didn't believe they were enough. Kids carrying the weight of their family's hope like a loaded backpack. Kids who'd been taught their worth depended on a letter from a school they'd never visited. And I said something I had never said out loud before. I didn't fail. I rerouted. That line stayed with me for weeks. It wasn't just a way to make peace with the past. It was the truest way to describe what happened. I didn't crash. I didn't collapse. I rerouted. I chose a different road when the one in front of me dead-ended. And in doing so, I realized there was no single road at all. One size doesn't fit all. One story doesn't explain every life. We live in a culture that loves a narrative of overcoming, but we rarely make space for the ones who never got the chance to arrive the traditional way. We glorify the kid who gets into all 8 Ivies, but ignore the one who drops out and builds something lasting from scratch. We tell kids that if they don't make it by 18, they're falling behind. But behind who? What race are we running? And who decided what the finish line is? I started thinking about what my life might have looked like if Stanford had said yes. Maybe I'd have gone. Maybe I'd have struggled to keep up. Maybe I'd have spent 4 years trying to prove I deserved to be there, all while losing touch with what made me come alive. Maybe I'd have gotten a great job, lived a neat life, and still felt hollow, because I wouldn't have learned the most important thing. Who I am when no one's grading me. Who I am when success isn't about status but service. I don't tell this story to bash college. For some people, It's the right choice, the launch pad, the dream. And that's beautiful, but it's not the only way up. And it should never be the only way in. My parents eventually stopped asking if I'd try again. One night, over dinner, my dad said, "I think you're doing what you're meant to do." It was simple, no fanfare, just the quiet approval of a man who had crossed oceans so I could choose my own life. I smiled, and I believed him. It's funny how life circles back. A year later, one of the Stanford professors invited our team to present our app at a language technology forum hosted, ironically, on their campus. I walked past the same admissions building I'd once dreamed of entering through. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt closure. I wasn't supposed to be there as a student. I was there as a creator. And that meant more to me than any diploma could have. Today, our app is used in over 50 classrooms across the U.S. We've expanded to support 3 additional languages, with the goal of helping more first-gen kids reconnect with their roots. I lead a small team now, diverse, scrappy, brilliant. None of them went to Stanford either. And yet, here we are, still building, still learning, still enough. If you're reading this and you've been rejected by a school, a job, a dream, you need to know something. Rejection is not the end of your story. Sometimes, it's just the universe clearing a path for one you weren't brave enough to imagine yet. There is no formula for who you're allowed to become, only the courage to rewrite your script when it no longer fits. Success isn't a college acceptance. It's not a LinkedIn title. It's not a parent's Facebook post. Success is quiet, hard-earned, often invisible. It's waking up with purpose, not panic. It's knowing that you are not behind. You're just on your own timeline. It's realizing you don't need permission to matter, because you already do. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this story, it's this: you are not your rejection. You are not the college you didn't get into, the job you lost, the plan that fell apart. You are not a number, a resume, or a line on someone else's spreadsheet. You are the courage it takes to start over. You are the decision to keep going, even when the path ahead is unclear. You are the story that refuses to fit into a template. We grow up believing there's one version of success, one narrow road paved with Ivy League names, high-paying titles, and a checklist that's been handed to us before we could even walk. But life, as I've learned, is not a straight line. It's a map of detours, reroutes, and moments that don't look like progress until you zoom out. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come after the sharpest left turns. When Stanford said no, I thought my word had expired. But in truth, it had just been set free. Let go, and then ask yourself, what would I build if I stopped waiting for permission? That's where your real life begins. If you've made it this far, thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for listening, for sitting with this story, for letting it be what it is, messy, honest, and mine. If it resonated with you in any way, if you saw a part of yourself in this journey, I'd love to hear from you. Hit that follow button to stay connected, because I'll be sharing more stories like this. Stories about growth, failure, reinvention, identity, and choosing your own version of enough. And hey, I want to know, what stories do you want to hear next? Is it about life after dropping out? Breaking generational expectations? Reinventing yourself in your 20s? The silent pressure of being the first in your family? Drop a comment below and let's keep this conversation going. Your story matters too. And maybe, just maybe, it's the one someone else needs to hear.